Label several questions to be asked. First is the story about a king who had an only son, and he called his son to him and said, "My son, I have learned that there is a well from which one drinks to attain immortality. It is my wish to live forever. So I give you the quest to go to bring back for me water from this well." So the son, heeding his father's request, dressed himself in the garb of an ordinary peasant and set out to fulfill his task. His wanderings and his seeking took 3 years, and he went to many different places, asking each time if anyone knew where this well could be found. But finally he came across an old hermit sitting in a forest, and as he did in so many other places, he told him of his quest. The old hermit said, "Oh yes, that well is situated only several leagues from here, in a vast cave. If you go north in that direction, you'll find it. But my son, heed well what the bird says." So the prince, in his disguise, went off the several leagues and found the mouth of the vast cave. And as he entered and his eyes grew accustomed to the dimness, he wound his way, and sure enough, in front of him there was a sparkling water of a well, clear, bubbling up from some vast depths. So taking the flask that he'd carried with him for all of this time in which to gather the water, he knelt and filled the flask. But thinking to himself that this was his opportunity also to drink of the well of immortality, he was about to take a drink from this flask when all of a sudden he heard a croaking sound, "Wait, wait!" And he looked around, and there, sitting on a ledge, was a bird. It had no feathers. Its beak was rotting and mottled. Its claws were broken. It seemed that it hardly had enough strength to cling on to the ledge. And the bird said, "Look at me. I drank from the water, and in the timeline of life, as all things do, degeneration takes place. Every day I grow more decrepit, but I cannot die." The prince heeded these words and turned and tipped and emptied the flask back in the well and said, "I will hasten to my father and tell him of what I have learned." So the first question that arises is, what did the prince say to his father, the king, when he returned after this experience? And the second story is about a sultan who had an only and very beautiful daughter. But his daughter took to her bed, and like a beautiful flower, she began to wilt and fade. So the Sultan feared for her life. He called physicians and soothsayers, magicians from all over the land to try to bring healing and life back to his beloved daughter, but without success. Finally, one wise old man said to the Sultan, "Sire, I believe that the only thing that can save your daughter is to eat from the apple of the tree of life." The Sultan said, tell me, where can I find this tree?" And the old wise man said, "It is said that people of a certain faith and from their ancient books tell of this tree, and they must know where it can be found." So immediately the Sultan sent out messengers to bring to him the 3 eldest rabbis of his kingdom, the elders of the Jewish faith. When they came before the Sultan said, "I am told that you know where might be found the tree of life. Bring me back an apple from this tree within 3 days, otherwise your people will suffer by my hand." The 3 rabbis went off and discussed within themselves, "Certainly, surely they knew from their ancient writings." And deep within themselves, they knew that this tree of life was in fact a living force. But where to find it? Who would know? They were in a great dilemma. They had only 3 days. One of the rabbis went back to his home, where his lovely daughter Leah asked him, "Father, why are you so perplexed and worried?" So he told her what dire straits they were in. "But Father," Leah said, "could it be that one of the 36 Tzaddiks who are said to hold up the consciousness of life at any given time will know where to find this tree?" "But where to find the Tzaddik?" said the rabbi. "Father, haven't you heard that there's an old hermit living in the forest nearby, who it is said could be one of these? Let's go now." So the rabbi and his daughter Leah set out into the forest, and sure enough, they came to the hut in which the old hermit lived. And when he opened the door to their knock and invited them in and asked them what it was that they were seeking, and the story was told, the old hermit went over to a shelf and took down an ancient and very thick tome. And he opened it up and took out a leaf that was fresh. He said, "This leaf has been in this book for hundreds of years. It is a leaf from the tree of life. And he handed it to Leah, the daughter of the rabbi, and said, "Place it under your pillow tonight." That night, of course, making their way back to their home, they had to stay at an inn. And with great reverence, Leah placed the leaf under her pillow, and that night she had a dream. She dreamt that she was in a vast and beautiful garden, such as he'd never seen before, fruiting trees of all kinds, all around, the smell of blossom in the air. And when she looked, she saw that under each tree there was an angel. So, not knowing how to find her way in the garden, she asked one of the angels, and the angel spoke and said, "I can guide you to where the tree of life stands, but there are 2 trees. You must choose which of these is the tree of life and bears that which you seek." So the angel led Leah to a little clearing where there stood 2 majestic and identical trees. Leah looked and looked. Both had ripe fruit dripping from their branches. But which was the tree that she was seeking? But then, having been privy to the stories of her faith and the deep knowledge that she had inside herself, she looked, and in one of the trees she saw a serpent. So she knew this must be the tree of knowledge. And so, turning, she went directly to the other tree and plucked an apple. The next morning, when Leah awoke, to her very great surprise, there, sitting on her pillow, was the ripe red apple she'd picked in her dream. She hastened to her father, and they in turn hastened to the palace, where the apple was handed to the sultan, who immediately took it in and placed it in the mouth of his pale, fading daughter, and she immediately began to awaken, to sit up, to be full of life and vigor once again. First, what would you say as the prince returning to your father the king to explain immortality? Why not to drink the flask of the water? It is said to give eternal life. And secondly, and more deeply, what is the relationship between these 2 stories? One about immortality, endless life, and the other about restoration of life. the myth, the inherent knowledge we have about the difference between knowledge and life. How do they go together, these three? But first, the first question, immortality. What does it mean for you? And how would you answer the Father, the King?
Immortality for me is it's living in eternal existence. It is escaping from death.
Right, absolutely. So immortality has a different meaning for us, doesn't it? Yeah. So with this awareness, what would you say to explain it as was needed by the prince to his father? What would you explain in this place where immortality no longer has any meaning for us? Everything is present, eternity, all of life, all of existence is present right now. Butterfly landing on the path in front of us.
It's so, I'd say to him that perhaps in that which we seek to hold on to so much, we've not necessarily been happiness.
Yes.
What we tend to seek or hold on to too tightly.
Yes.
Crumbles before
us. Yes.
Be wise in the choices.
Yes.
Because immortality, if you consider it when it comes to humans, it is a very physical desire.
Yes.
It's a desire to remain on the earth. The saying goes, be careful what you wish for, you might get.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, if we preserve the state exactly as it is, then we don't get to see the dynamics and the changing and the fluidity.
Indeed.
It creates stagnation that way.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So what is their relationship, these two stories? It all comes back again to our endeavor to understand what happens when stillness and movement meet, and then again to lead us into our quest, and indeed it is a quest, to understand the nature of emptiness, or prepare the mind for its experience of that. So there's a relationship between these three, interwoven in these two stories: immortality, life, and knowledge. How do they come together in us?
As far as metaphysical sense, in the first story, prologue became gives you the knowledge that it is the water is not what you need. And the second, the snake, it's the same thing. It gives it itself It's the trick of knowledge. Gives itself that tree that Bill finds is the tree of knowledge.
Yes. Yes, yes. Yes. And life, the tree of life, what does it signify for us in this story? To eat of the tree of life is a restoration, is renewing. So it has a significance for us in relationship to this, doesn't it? Life. So again, we're coming back to the question that's been asked these last days. What's your relationship with life now? What is life for us? And so it's a little alchemy going on here, isn't there? A little alchemy. So we'll stir the pot some more.